Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into a place that smells faintly of olive oil, warm dust, and freshly scraped leather. The light of early morning filters through a small window, golden, slow, and sleepy, like honey spreading over stone. You can hear the soft rasp of a knife being honed, the distant coo of a pigeon perched on the roof, and the rhythmic creak of wood beneath bare feet. You're standing in an ancient Greek sandal workshop, Athens, maybe around the 5th century BCE. The streets outside are already stirring, but in here, time moves differently. You're safe, calm, and no one is in a hurry. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a slow breath. The air feels a little thick with the scent of cured hide and ash, a smell that's strangely comforting once you get used to it. The craftsman, he's older, maybe 50, with a gray beard and patient eyes, nods at you. He's been up since dawn. For him, this isn't just work, it's a rhythm, a quiet dance between hand and material, between need and beauty. You look around. The space isn't big, just a square room with low beams and shelves lined with tools that gleam dully in the light. There are strips of leather hanging from pegs like sleeping snakes, jars of oil and resin, and a few unfinished sandals stacked neatly in the corner. A cat, because of course there's a cat, sits on the window ledge licking one paw with that look of timeless superiority cats have always had. You realize that this scene could belong to any age. The old man picks up a thin strip of hide and runs his thumb along its edge. He doesn't speak much. He doesn't need to. You can tell he's been doing this for decades. His fingers move with an ease that borders on meditation. He sharpens his small knife against a block of stone, making slow, circular motions. You can hear it, a soft shh, like the sea brushing sand. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek sandal makers were considered mere tradesmen or something closer to artisans. After all, their work wasn't just functional. It shaped the way people walked, stood, even carried themselves. The line between necessity and art was always a little blurred. One thing's clear though, without craftsmen like this, the city wouldn't move, literally. You lean against the wooden door frame, watching the process unfold. The craftsman's apprentice, a boy of maybe 14, fans the coals of a small brazier. A pot of melted beeswax sits warming nearby, its sweet scent mingling with the sharper smell of leather. This wax will coat the threads later, protecting them from fraying. The boy hums softly, a tune without words. You don't recognize it, but it sounds like something the sea might hum if it had a voice. A shaft of sunlight catches a fine cloud of dust in the air. Tiny golden motes float lazily, as if the world itself has decided to slow down. You feel your shoulders drop. The noise of your own thoughts begins to fade. It's funny to think that in this calm little room, something as ordinary as a sandal is taking shape. A thing that will soon walk through the agora, maybe step into a temple, maybe be worn by a poet or soldier. Each pair tells a story, though no one ever stops to listen. And yet, the stories are there, in every stitch, every scuff, every worn edge. The craftsman reaches for a small, curved awl and begins to pierce a row of holes along the edge of a leather sole. His movements are hypnotic, measured, exact, almost ritualistic. "Leather remembers," he mutters softly, almost to himself. You don't know if he means the way it stretches or the way it holds the shape of every foot that wears it. Either way, it feels like a small truth that could apply to life itself. He gestures for you to come closer. You do, stepping over a coil of cord and a few stray shavings. He points to a fresh piece of hide stretched across the workbench. "Cow," he says simply, tapping the thick, smooth surface. "Good hide, from Marathon." He runs his hand across it like a proud gardener showing off a rose. "This one will last years." It's strange, but you feel a kind of affection growing for the man, the cat, the quiet hum of this little world. You're part of it now, even if just for a moment. A mainstream fact drifts into your mind. Sandal making was one of the most common crafts in ancient Greece. Some families did it for generations, passing down not just tools, but instincts: when to cut, how to stretch, how to read the grain of the leather. The Greek word for sandal, sandalion, shows up even in early texts like Homer's. The heroes of the Iliad wore them, priests removed them in temples, and ordinary people mended them at home when times were tight. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Ancient Greek women sometimes wore sandals with messages carved into the soles. When they walked on dusty roads, the imprint left behind might spell a teasing phrase like, "Follow me." Imagine that! Ancient flirting, one dusty footprint at a time. Somewhere between marketing genius and cheeky romance. Outside, a donkey brays. The sound drifts through the small window and fades again. The cat flicks its tail in annoyance. The craftsman chuckles. "He's complaining about the heat already," he says. You both know the day will get hotter soon. The leather, drying in the sunlight, will grow softer first and then brittle if left too long. Time is measured differently here, not by clocks, but by how materials behave. He picks up a small amphora of oil and rubs a few drops into the hide. The sheen deepens, turning it from pale brown to something richer, almost golden. "Olive oil," he explains. "Good for leather, good for skin, good for nearly everything." You suspect he's not wrong. For a moment, you just listen. The rhythmic scrape of tools, the crackle of the brazier, the murmur of the city outside. There's a kind of peace here that modern life rarely grants. A peace that doesn't come from silence, but from familiarity. The comfort of repeated motions, of craft practiced so long it becomes an extension of breath. The boy, the apprentice, glances up at you shyly. He's threading a needle with waxed linen cord, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth in concentration. "He's been here since sunrise," the craftsman says. "One day, he'll make better sandals than me." The boy grins. You nod in approval, pretending you know the proper way to judge a sandal. Historians still argue whether these workshops were part of guilds or independent family trades. Some believe that sandal makers operated in clusters near the agora, forming informal networks that shared tools and gossip. Others say each craftsman guarded his secrets carefully, passing them down only to kin. You imagine both are true. People always find ways to blend community and competition. The craftsman places a freshly cut sole beside the others. "Tomorrow," he says, "we'll make one for walking to Delphi. The road is long, needs thicker leather." You can tell he enjoys saying it, like the sandals themselves are going on adventures he'll never take. Maybe that's part of the joy, sending something you made out into the world, knowing it'll carry someone's story for miles. He wipes his hands on a cloth. The boy yawns. The cat curls into a ball. You can almost feel the warmth of the morning deepening, pressing softly against your skin. If you listen closely, you might swear the sandals on the shelf are whispering to one another. Stories of dusty roads, marble steps, sea spray. Or maybe that's just your mind growing drowsy, lulled by the rhythm of a world that no longer rushes. Outside, the city hums. Inside, the craftsman hums too. Different tunes, same beat. The smell of leather thickens as the brazier flares for a moment. The old man doesn't flinch. You realize he's done this so many times that the heat, the smoke, even the small risks don't bother him. It's all part of the pattern. You glance again at the doorway. Light has shifted, more golden now, softer. You think about how sandals, humble as they are, shaped civilizations. How they carried merchants, philosophers, lovers, soldiers. How each step left a trace, a story beneath the surface of history. You probably wouldn't survive a day walking barefoot across the Athenian stones, but somehow that makes the work here feel even more impressive. The craftsman wipes sweat from his brow, smiles faintly, and says, "Every step starts here." And you believe him. The air outside the workshop thickens with the scent of sun-warmed dust and something faintly animal. Raw hides just arrived from the tanner's yard. You step out to see them piled like folded parchment, still carrying the memory of the creature they once protected. A few flies hover, hopeful, but they're quickly brushed away by the tanner's apprentice, who's clearly done this dance before. He grins at you, holding his breath as he hauls another piece of hide over his shoulder. You follow him, curious and a little cautious. It's not exactly the kind of place you'd bring a picnic. He leads you down a narrow lane toward the tanner's courtyard, where the day's work begins in earnest. The ground is uneven, slick in some places with water that glints under the sun. Rows of stone vats line the yard, each filled with something you're not sure you want to identify. The smell here is strong, sharp, salty, and earthy all at once. You catch yourself holding your breath, though after a few minutes, your nose gives up the fight and accepts its fate. The tanner, a barrel-chested man with hands like carved oak, waves from behind a cloud of steam. "Welcome," he says, his voice bravely but kind. "You'll get used to it." You nod politely, though you're not convinced. He gestures for you to come closer, and soon you're peering into a vat filled with water, bark, and something that looks suspiciously like mud. Oak bark, he explains, and a bit of ash. Gives the leather strength. He dips a wooden pole into the mix, stirring slowly. "And smell," he adds with a grin. Historians still argue whether tanning was seen as noble work or something better kept out of sight. Ancient Athens had strict zoning. Smelly trades like this one were often pushed to the outskirts of town, near the rivers where the waste could flow away. You can see why. But you also sense a quiet respect here. These people handle the raw materials of life itself. Without them, sandals, armor, and even scroll bindings wouldn't exist. You step carefully between the vats, trying not to slip. The hides are first soaked to loosen the hair, then scraped clean with curved knives. You watch as a worker stretches one over a wooden beam and begins shaving it down, each stroke producing a soft, wet sound. The blade glides like someone peeling fruit. Little curls of hair fall to the ground. The tanner's apprentice gathers them up. Apparently, they'll be used later to stuff cushions. Waste nothing. That's the rule. A mainstream historical fact often used a combination of salt, alum, and bark to preserve and soften leather. The process could take weeks. Hides were soaked, stretched, dried, then soaked again, each time a little stronger, a little more pliable. Some records mention seawater being used too, its minerals lending a subtle sheen to the finished product. In a city built of stone and marble, it's easy to forget that half its beauty relied on the quiet, messy labor of people like this. And here's your quirky tidbit of the night. To remove stubborn hair and fat from the hides, tanners sometimes used a paste made from pigeon droppings. Yes, pigeon droppings. The ammonia content helped soften the fibers. So, next time you see a pigeon strutting around like it owns the world, remember, it might have been an essential part of Greek fashion. You almost have to respect it. The tanner dips his hands into one of the vats, unfazed by the liquid's murky color. "You don't rush leather," he says. "Rush it and it cracks. Let it rest and it remembers how to bend." You think again of what the sandal maker said earlier, how leather remembers. Maybe this is what he meant. Every step of the process leaves an imprint. Salt, sun, patience. He hauls a hide out of the vat and drapes it over a beam. The color is a pale tan now, almost golden. The water runs off in thin ribbons that catch the sunlight. It's beautiful in its own strange way, ugly and graceful at once. You reach out, hesitating, and he nods. The surface feels cool and slick, but underneath there's a faint warmth, like skin just waking up. Historians still argue whether ancient tanners used imported materials or relied mostly on local resources. Some point to trade records suggesting bark and minerals were brought in from northern forests, while others claim Athens had enough trees and ash to handle its own needs. Either way, the process was the same: water, patience, and a stubborn refusal to cut corners. The tanner wipes his hands on a rag, then points toward a line of hides drying in the sun. They hang like sails, flapping gently in the warm breeze. By evening, he says, they'll be ready for your sandal maker. You realize now that this courtyard and the quiet workshop you left earlier are two halves of the same heartbeat. What begins here ends in that peaceful little room, stitched into something that will carry another person's weight across a lifetime of steps. You sit on a low wall, watching the workers move in an easy rhythm, one stirring, one scraping, one hauling. No one hurries. The sun dictates the pace. Even the flies seem to drift lazily through the heat. It's strangely hypnotic, and before long, you find yourself drifting too, eyes following the slow sway of the drying hides. A sudden splash breaks the trance. A young worker has dropped his pole into a vat and is fishing it out with much swearing and laughter from the others. Every day he baptizes himself in oak bark, the tanner jokes. The boy rolls his eyes and grins, dripping wet but proud of his rescue mission. You can't help but laugh quietly too. It's a good reminder. Even in ancient times, people still had clumsy moments before lunch. The smell, once sharp and shocking, now feels oddly grounding. It reminds you of earth, sweat, sun, and work, the fundamental things that make civilization run. You imagine philosophers in white robes debating ideals, while their sandals, quietly holding everything together, owe their existence to this humble yard. The tanner points toward the hills in the distance. That's where the goats graze, he says. Tougher hides up there. You can tell by the wind. He says it as though the landscape itself participates in the making of leather. The grass, the sun, the goats, and the breeze all conspiring to create the perfect texture. Maybe they do. Ancient crafts often felt less like domination of nature and more like conversation with it. He lifts another hide and spreads it wide, the sunlight catching a faint pattern in the surface, tiny, swirling scars. This one was clever, he says softly. Escaped a wolf once. You can see the faint claw marks. It's sobering and beautiful at the same time. Every piece of leather really does tell a story, even if it's only whispered through texture. You notice the apprentice brushing a layer of oil over a half-dried hide. It glistens like polished wood. Olive oil again, the tanner says, seeing your curiosity. Same as what you eat, only older, he winks. Some men say the smell keeps bad spirits away. Others say it just keeps the leather from cracking. Historians still argue whether ancient Greeks believed leatherwork held ritual or symbolic importance. Some evidence suggests that offerings of sandals or belts were made at temples, especially when starting long journeys. You imagine a traveler leaving behind an old pair before setting off, trusting new ones to carry him farther. The afternoon heat deepens. A cicada begins its endless buzz somewhere nearby. The sound weaves into the rhythm of scraping and splashing. You feel yourself drifting again, half awake, half dreaming. The work continues, steady and sure. The hides darken as they dry, taking on the color of warm bread crust. You think of the sandal maker waiting back in his workshop, sharpening his knives, preparing his patterns. Somewhere between this messy yard and that tidy bench lies the soul of craftsmanship, the transformation of something raw into something human. The tanner leans on his beam, squinting at the sky. "Weather's good," he murmurs. "Leather likes sun, not rain." He glances at you and adds, "So do people." You smile. He's right, of course. In a few hours, these hides will be carried back through the winding streets of Athens, rolled over shoulders or loaded onto a cart. Children will wrinkle their noses as the smell passes, while sandal makers will lean out of doorways, eager for new material. And just like that, the cycle continues. Hide to craft to step to dust. You take one last look around. The vats shimmer in the sunlight. The air hums with warmth, and the smell, once so strong, is now just part of the background, a kind of earthy lullaby. You realize you've stopped noticing the unpleasant parts. All you see now is texture, patience, and rhythm. Maybe that's what craftsmanship teaches, even to those who only watch. How to stand still long enough to see beauty where others see work. You wake the next morning to the muted clatter of buckets and the soft slap of wet hides being moved again. The sun is just starting to push through the haze, and the smell, sharp, earthy, and faintly sour, lets you know you're back in the tanner's world. But today, something feels different. The tanner isn't stirring the vats with his usual easy rhythm. Instead, he's hunched over a low table filled with bowls, jars, and bundles of herbs that look like a mixture between a kitchen experiment and mild witchcraft. He glances up, eyes bright. "Today," he says with a small grin, "you'll see the real work, the alchemy of tanning." He spreads his arms dramatically, like a priest at a ceremony, and you half expect thunder to rumble in approval. Nothing happens, of course, just the soft rustle of leather in the breeze. Still, his words feel true. There's a certain quiet magic to what he's about to do. You step closer, peering at the ingredients. Bark shavings, sea salt, ashes, something that looks suspiciously like old wine, and, because ancient Greeks loved practicality over poetry, a small pot of pigeon droppings. The tanner stirs each into a thick, dark paste, humming under his breath. "Everything has a use," he mutters, "even what we'd rather ignore." You make a mental note not to complain about your modern detergent ever again. Historians still argue whether ancient tanners fully understood the chemical processes they relied on, or simply trusted trial and error. They didn't have the word enzyme, but they knew instinctively that time, warmth, and the right mixture of materials could transform something tough and lifeless into supple, golden leather. You watch as he brushes the mixture onto the inside of a hide, working it in with his hands, unbothered by the texture. The sun climbs higher, warming the courtyard. The smell intensifies, a complex perfume of decay and rebirth. The hide must be taught to breathe again, he explains, rubbing the mixture deeper into the fibers. Otherwise, it stays stiff, like stone. You realize that this whole process isn't so much about domination as it is about persuasion. The leather isn't forced into submission, it's coaxed, convinced, almost charmed into becoming something else. A mainstream historical fact floats into your thoughts. Greek tanners often relied on plant tannins, especially from oak, sumac, and pine bark, to bind the proteins in animal hide, making it more durable. They were among the first in the Mediterranean to refine the technique so precisely that Roman craftsmen later adopted and expanded it. The method barely changed for nearly 2,000 years. Even in some modern workshops, the same recipe, minus the pigeon parts, still holds. The tanner moves to another hide, this one thicker, darker. Cowhide for soldiers' sandals, he explains. Needs to be stronger. Feet travel far, you know. He sprinkles salt across the surface, then presses it in with flat palms. Salt pulls out what's left of life, he says softly. makes room for something new. It's oddly poetic for such a gritty task. You wonder if he rehearsed that line for visitors, or if wisdom just happens naturally when your job is half art, half endurance. A splash from one of the vats interrupts your thoughts. The apprentice, his arms coated in streaks of brown and gray, is fishing out a piece of leather that's been soaking overnight. He hauls it up with both hands, water streaming from it in silver ribbons. The tanner inspects it, nods once, and hangs it over a wooden frame to dry. The hide stretches like a drum skin, glistening in the light. You can see faint veins still tracing through it, a ghostly reminder of what it once was. The boy wipes his brow with the back of his arm. "It looks alive," you murmur. The tanner smiles. That's the point. You sit on a nearby stool, feeling the warmth seep through the air. The rhythmic motions, the brushing, rubbing, stirring, begin to lull you. The tanner's courtyard, noisy yesterday, feels almost ceremonial today. You realize that this process has existed for so long, it's practically a heartbeat of civilization, steady, patient, and necessary. Here's a quirky tidbit to keep your mind from drifting too far. Some ancient Greek tanners used to test the readiness of a hide by pressing it against their cheek. If it was still too cold or damp, it wasn't ready. If it felt warm and dry, alive in its own way, then it was perfect. You glance at the tanner, and sure enough, he does exactly that. He presses a piece of leather to his cheek, closes his eyes, and nods. "Good," he says. "It's breathing." You smile to yourself, thinking how different that is from our sterile, mechanical ways today. There's something human about it, something that insists the craftsman and the material must know each other, must meet halfway. The tanner gestures toward a set of jars filled with liquid of varying colors, from pale gold to deep red-brown. Dyes, he explains, from plants, roots, even sea creatures. He picks up one jar and shakes it gently. "Murex shellfish," he says proudly. "Expensive, but beautiful." The color inside is a rich, royal purple, shimmering in the sunlight. Not for sandals, of course, for nobles. Sandals get ochre, rust, and brown. Historians still argue whether ordinary citizens ever wore colored sandals, or if it was reserved for the wealthy. Fragments of dyed leather have been found in excavation sites, but it's hard to tell if they came from shoes or decorative bindings. You imagine a philosopher in muted ochre sandals, lecturing in the agora, his feet quietly matching his robes. Subtle style, ancient edition. The apprentice dips a brush into another jar, this one filled with a dark reddish tint, and begins to streak it across a half-dried hide. The leather soaks it up eagerly, transforming before your eyes. "Like painting," he says shyly, "only slower." His master chuckles, "And with more smells." You laugh too, it's true. The scent here has grown so complex, it's almost a character of its own. You notice how sunlight glints off the wet surface of the hides, turning them into shimmering, shifting mirrors. The courtyard feels both ancient and eternal. You can almost picture similar scenes unfolding hundreds of years apart in cities and villages across the Mediterranean, each with its own patient craftsman whispering to the hides. The tanner pours a thin stream of oil over the dyed leather, rubbing it in with long, deliberate strokes. "Now we feed it," he says. "Oil keeps it soft, makes it remember warmth." He hands you a small cloth and nods for you to try. The leather feels surprisingly alive beneath your hand, like a muscle relaxing. It soaks up the oil greedily, darkening slightly. You can't help but smile at how tactile it is, messy, grounding, real. He watches you work for a moment, then says, "You can tell a man's patience by his leather." You pause, unsure if it's a compliment or a warning. "Leather doesn't hurry," he continues. You rush it, it tears. You listen to it, it lasts. The words hang in the air, thick and slow, like the scent of oil and bark. By late afternoon, the hides hang in rows, drying under the soft orange glow of the sun. The tanner stretches his back, satisfied. Tomorrow, he says, we cut. You think of the sandal maker waiting down the street, sharpening his knives, ready for this next step. The chain of creation feels intimate, tanner to craftsman to wearer. Every person, every motion, every ounce of patience is stitched invisibly into the final product. You glance one last time at the rows of drying hides. They ripple in the warm breeze like the sails of ships waiting for wind, ready to carry unseen stories to faraway feet. It's strange how something born from death, animal hide, can be turned into a vessel for life again. A paradox, soft under your fingers. The tanner wipes his hands on a rag, then pours a small dipper of water over the floor to settle the dust. The smell, the sound, the glimmer of light, it all feels like the closing act of a quiet performance. You see, he says, not magic, just time. But as you step away, you're not entirely convinced. You've seen enough to know that time, in the right hands, is a kind of magic. The workshop smells faintly of yesterday's leather, warm, earthy, and touched with olive oil. When you return, the air feels cooler, shaded by linen curtains that sway gently in the morning breeze. The sandal maker, your quiet craftsman from before, is already awake. He's sitting on a low stool beside a clean plank of wood, a bit of charcoal in one hand and a strip of dried hide resting across his knees. He doesn't look up at first. He's focused, tracing a faint outline on the board. You realize he's drawing a shape, simple, curved, familiar. This, he says after a moment, is where every journey begins. He looks up and gestures toward you. Sit, he says with a half smile. You have feet, don't you? You hesitate, then obey. The wood beneath you is cool, smooth from years of use. He points to your sandals, or what's left of them. We'll make better ones, he says, amused. He places a thin piece of parchment under your foot. Stay still. You do. The charcoal touches your skin lightly, sketching around each toe, the curve of your heel, the arch that carries your weight. It's ticklish, and you try not to laugh. You move, you walk crooked, he warns gently, and no one wants crooked sandals. You hold still, suppressing a smile. When he finishes, he lifts the paper carefully, inspecting it as though it's a map to a hidden city. Historians still argue whether sandal makers in ancient Greece took exact measurements for each customer or worked from standard shapes. Some surviving leather fragments show signs of being custom-fitted, small adjustments for bunions, arches, and toe spacing. Others, found in market stalls, seem mass-produced by ancient standards. You like to imagine both existing side by side, the bespoke craft for the wealthy and simple ready-mades for everyone else. He sets aside your tracing and reaches for a wooden template, a worn piece covered in faint carvings. These, he explains, are my memory. He taps the edge. Every foot I've measured leaves something behind. He has dozens of them, stacked neatly like flat ghosts of people who've long since walked their miles. You picture philosophers, fishmongers, and travelers, each immortalized in leather and wood. The craftsman dips his charcoal again and begins marking the outline of a new sole on a fresh piece of leather. His hands are steady, slow. The sound, soft scratching on hide, is oddly soothing. You watch the lines appear, the gentle taper at the toe, the firm roundness of the heel. He hums faintly under his breath, some tune that probably hasn't had words in 100 years. He looks up suddenly. Do you know what the foot tells me? He asks. You shake your head. Everything, he says, smiling. How someone walks, where they stand, what they do. Thing heels, philosopher or poet. Thick ones, farmer. Narrow toes, noblewoman. Wide ones, runner or soldier. The foot never lies. You glance at your own tracing, wondering what your feet might confess. Probably too many late-night snacks and not enough long walks, but you decide not to mention that. He leans back, studying his work. In this city, he says, a sandal isn't just a shoe, it's your companion. It knows where you've been, where you linger, even where you hesitate. You think about that, how sandals, so ordinary, can quietly record the story of a life, step by step. A mainstream historical fact floats to mind. The Greeks considered the foot sacred in its own quiet way. In sculpture, it was studied as carefully as the face. In mythology, gods disguised themselves by changing their footprints. The famous statue of Hermes often shows him wearing calaria, winged sandals said to make him swift and weightless. You imagine your craftsman smiling at that story, unimpressed. Wings are fine, he might say, but wings wear out too. The craftsman pulls a cord of flax from a basket and begins measuring against your tracing. We'll make the straps simple, he says. You're no prince, no priest, just someone who walks. He says it kindly, like it's a compliment. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Greeks believed that measuring someone's foot could reveal their character or even their fate. In a few old plays, sandal size was used as a joke. Small feet for delicate women, large ones for clumsy heroes. There's even an old saying, roughly translated, that goes, "May your sandals fit your steps, not your pride." Sounds like the ancient equivalent of "stay humble." The craftsman takes a knife, the blade worn down from years of sharpening, and trims the edges of the sole you watched him draw. The sound of slicing leather is soft and satisfying, like tearing paper very slowly. Each cut feels deliberate, final. The sunlight catches the curve of the blade, and you can see the faint trembling of the air from the workshop's warmth. He pauses, lifts the piece, and turns it in his hands. Perfect, he murmurs. Not too long, not too short. You'll walk easy. He sets it aside, then gestures to another piece of hide. Now the twin. He doesn't trace again, he just knows. His hands remember what the first one felt like. Watching him work is like watching someone translate a language only they can hear. You lean back slightly, eyes drifting across the workshop. The cat from before is asleep again, this time inside an empty basket. The apprentice, barefoot with dust on his knees, is oiling a strip of leather with slow, rhythmic strokes. The air hums with a low tranquility, the kind that makes you want to sigh without knowing why. Historians still argue whether these workshops were solitary spaces or small teams of artisans working together. Some texts describe large, noisy quarters filled with apprentices, each assigned a task. One cuts, one punches holes, one sews. Others paint a quieter picture. One master craftsman, a helper, a cat, and the endless whisper of tools. Looking around, you suspect this place leans toward the latter. The craftsman returns to your tracing and makes small notations on it, tiny marks you can't decipher. Arch height, he says when he catches your puzzled look. The body's balance begins with the feet. A bad sandal, bad back. He taps the paper once. The gods gave us bones, but it's up to us to keep them aligned. He's not wrong. You wiggle your toes a little, feeling the cool floor beneath them. You imagine ancient athletes sprinting in sandals barely thicker than your hand, soldiers marching across stony plains, dancers balancing on tiptoe in soft leather straps. The human body hasn't changed much since then, but maybe our shoes have gotten more complicated than they need to be. Some say, he muses, that feet are the truest part of us. They touch the world when everything else floats above it. He grins. Except philosophers. Their feet never touch anything. You laugh softly. earning an approving nod. He sets your tracing carefully aside, then picks up a pair of calipers, a simple bronze tool shaped like a wishbone. He uses it to measure the width of the leather sole, adjusting tiny details. The movement is precise, tender, almost affectionate. You realize he isn't just making footwear, he's sculpting comfort. Outside, a faint chorus of street sounds drifts in. The clang of pottery, a donkey braying, voices calling out prices. Inside, everything slows again. You could swear time bends a little around the rhythm of his hands. He finishes the second sole and lays it beside the first. They're nearly identical. You see, he says proudly, balance, like twins who agree on everything. He grins at his own joke, then wipes his hands on a cloth. The apprentice looks up from his work. Shall I prepare the straps? He asks. Not yet, the craftsman replies. Leather must rest, feet too. He looks at you knowingly. Go take a walk, feel the ground. The foot teaches before the sandal does. You stand, stretching, and glance once more at your tracing on the table, the faint outline of your own foot in black charcoal, fragile yet oddly significant. The craftsman notices your gaze and adds softly, when you come back, it'll be ready to walk. You step outside. The sunlight greets you like warm water, the cobblestones uneven but alive beneath your bare soles. For the first time, you understand what he meant. The ground is rough, honest, real. Each pebble, each grain of dust presses a small truth into your skin. You feel connected, not to history, but to the simple act of being here, in contact with the same earth that carried the ancients. You think back to the craftsman's words. Every foot tells a story. You wonder what yours will say when he's finished shaping it into leather. Maybe that you walked through time itself, one slow, careful step at a time. You return to the workshop in the late afternoon, the sunlight now gold and sleepy, stretching itself lazily across the doorway. The smell of leather greets you first, richer now, deeper, like warm bread, but sharper, carrying the faint tang of tanning oil and something earthy underneath. The craftsman glances up when you enter, his hands already busy. He doesn't say hello, he simply nods toward the workbench. Your soles are there, waiting. The leather has darkened slightly as it dried and settled. He runs a calloused thumb along one of them, testing the edge. Soft enough, he murmurs. Now we begin to wake it. You aren't entirely sure what that means, but you soon find out. He lifts a rounded stone, polished smooth from years of use, and begins rubbing the leather in slow, circular motions. The sound is low and rhythmic, like distant waves brushing the shore. This, he explains, is how you teach leather to remember. You press warmth into it, and it learns to move like skin. It's mesmerizing to watch. The circles grow tighter, then wider, then slower again. The leather softens before your eyes, losing its stiffness and taking on a faint sheen. He repeats the process with the second sole, and soon both pieces look alive, no longer raw, but supple and willing. Historians still argue whether Greek tanners used oils derived from animal fat, olive oil, or mixtures of beeswax and resin. The truth might be all of them, depending on where you lived or how much drachma you could spare. The rich might have worn sandals treated with perfumed oils, the poor with whatever was cheapest and most practical. Either way, every pair carried the scent of its maker's world. When he finishes polishing, the craftsman sets the soles aside and turns to his apprentice. Bring the strips. The boy returns with several long ribbons of leather, thin, strong, and freshly cut. He drapes them carefully across the table. The craftsman begins sorting through them, muttering softly. Too thick, he says, discarding one. Too dry. He tugs at another until it flexes just right. This one will listen. You lean closer as he threads one strip through a narrow hole at the edge of a sole. He works without haste, his fingers moving like they're following a silent rhythm. The strap slides through, looping under and over before he secures it with a quick, practiced knot. "The first hole," he says, "always decides how the rest will behave. Choose it wrong, and your sandal will argue with you for years." You smile. It sounds like he's talking about people, not footwear. He grins knowingly. "Everything's a conversation," he says. "Leather, wood, even the ground. You just have to listen long enough." A mainstream fact slips naturally into the moment. Greek sandals often had intricate lacing systems that wrapped around the ankle and sometimes up the calf. Soldiers, especially hoplites, wore versions that tied high for stability during long marches. Women's sandals, by contrast, were more decorative, often adorned with dyed straps or small metal studs. Archaeologists have found impressions of these designs on ancient floors, little echoes of fashion pressed into dust. As the craftsman threads more straps through the leather, you notice how the pattern begins to form a shape, elegant but sturdy. The apprentice sits beside him, punching new holes with a small awl, each one perfectly spaced. The smell of fresh-cut hide fills the room again, mingling with the scent of olive oil and dust. "You see these holes?" the craftsman asks, holding one up for you to see. "Every one is a choice. Too close, and the strap breaks. Too far, and the foot slides." He looks you in the eye. Balance, always. Balance seems to be his mantra. The more he works, the more you realize that making sandals is less about fashion and more about philosophy. Each decision is a dialogue between purpose and comfort, between strength and grace. He threads the last strap and ties it loosely into place. "Try," he says, sliding the sandal toward you. You hesitate. It's still warm from his hands, but you slip your foot into it. The fit is surprisingly gentle, hugging your arch, leaving your toes free. You take a few steps. The floor is cool beneath the sole, but the leather moves with you, bending easily. "It remembers already," he says approvingly. "That's a good sign." A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. Some ancient Greeks believed that leather had a kind of spirit, a leftover essence from the animal it came from. Wearing sandals, then, wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. You carried the quiet endurance of the creature beneath your feet. It's oddly poetic, and a bit eerie, to imagine every step as a partnership between human and hide. You mention this thought aloud, and the craftsman chuckles. "Spirit or no spirit, leather teaches patience," he says. "If you rush it, it cracks. If you respect it, it serves you." He picks up the other sandal and begins the same careful threading process. Historians still argue whether Greek cobblers were considered true artisans or simply laborers. In Athens, at least, the line blurred. Some sandal makers grew wealthy and well-known. Others lived in the shadows of their workshops. One even had his name scratched onto a stone near the agora, perhaps a form of ancient advertisement, or maybe just a boast. The craftsman finishes the second sandal, turning it over with satisfaction. "These will carry you," he says simply. You thank him, but he waves a hand dismissively. "Don't thank me yet. The test comes later. Sandals, like friendships, prove themselves only after walking." You take another step, then another. The straps tighten just enough to feel secure, and for the first time, you understand the care behind the design. You imagine ancient travelers crossing mountains, priests walking marble courtyards, fishermen hauling nets, each trusting the same humble invention. The apprentice gathers the scraps of leftover leather, rolling them neatly. "We'll save these," he says, "for children's shoes." You realize nothing here is wasted, not even the smallest piece. Outside, the day has softened into early evening. The light has turned amber, filtering through the curtains in warm stripes. The cat yawns and stretches, curling itself closer to the pile of sandals by the wall. The sound of distant laughter drifts in from the street. The craftsman sits back, folding his arms. "Do you know," he says after a pause, "that some people used to write charms on their sandals?" You tilt your head. "Words of luck," he explains, "or names of lovers, hidden beneath the foot, pressed into every step." You imagine that. Secret inscriptions fading slowly as the wearer walks. Love and luck ground into the earth one footprint at a time. Maybe there's poetry in that. Or maybe it's just human nature, wanting to leave a trace, even in dust. He continues, "Once a girl came here, asked me to carve her name into her husband's sandals, said it would make him think of her, even when he wandered." He smiles faintly. "Maybe it worked. Maybe not. But I still have the tool for it." He lifts a fine awl with a narrow tip and shows you the small marks carved into its handle. Hearts, stars, and a few letters. "Stories in leather," he murmurs. "Everyone's got their own." You sit quietly, letting his words settle like dust on a windowsill. There's something deeply human about this place. The repetition, the patience, the attention to things most people never notice. Each hole, each strap, each polished edge is a whisper of someone's care, preserved in a craft older than memory. He hands you the finished sandals wrapped in soft linen. "Take them," he says, "but don't wear them yet. Let them sleep tonight." You raise an eyebrow. "Leather dreams," he adds with a grin. "If you let it rest, it'll remember your shape better in the morning." You smile back, amused and a little enchanted. You thank him again, and this time he nods without protest. The apprentice waves, and the cat flicks its tail in lazy farewell. As you step outside, the air feels cooler, carrying the scent of evening, smoke, bread, and sea salt. The sandals are light in your hands, but they seem to hum faintly with possibility. You walk home barefoot again, feeling the ground through your soles. The streets are quieter now. Lamps flicker to life in windows, and distant voices drift like fading music. Somewhere behind you, the craftsman is probably tidying his bench, folding scraps, muttering softly to himself. You look down at your feet and think, there's something sacred about simplicity. A strip of leather, a few holes, and a human hand. That's all it takes to carry civilization forward. And as the last light fades from the sky, you realize something else. The story of sandals isn't about shoes at all. It's about walking, about movement, connection, and the quiet endurance of those who took one careful step after another across the long road of history. The next morning arrives softly, like a whisper under the door. You wake before the city stirs, the air still cool and blue from the night. Outside, roosters complain somewhere in the distance, and you can smell the faint sweetness of baking bread drifting through the narrow streets. Your sandals rest where you left them, wrapped neatly in linen beside your bed. You hesitate before touching them, half expecting to feel warmth, like they really did spend the night dreaming. The fabric is cool to your fingers, but when you unwrap the bundle, the leather glows faintly in the morning light, smooth and calm, as if the night had taught it patience. You slide one sandal on. The leather hugs your foot instantly, softer now, shaped to your soul. The straps move with the quiet confidence of something that knows its purpose. You wiggle your toes experimentally. It feels right. You remember the craftsman's advice. Let the leather sleep. You smile. Maybe he was right. Maybe everything in this world breathes a little when left alone overnight. You step outside, sandals whispering against the stone street. The city is still waking. The shutters of bakeries creak open. Merchants drag carts across cobblestones, and the smell of olives, smoke, and dew mixes in the air. You start walking toward the agora, the bustling heart of the city, partly to test your new footwear, partly to see how the world feels through it. Historians still argue whether most Athenians owned just one pair of sandals or several for different occasions. Evidence suggests both extremes. Wealthy citizens had pairs for walking, ceremonies, even lounging, while poorer folk might patch a single pair again and again until it resembled more memory than shoe. Either way, sandals weren't fashion statements. They were tools shaped by the rhythm of everyday life. You pass a small group of women carrying amphora on their shoulders. Their feet are bare, toes gripping the uneven road with practiced grace. They chat quietly in between careful steps, the sound of laughter mingling with the morning hum. You glance at their soles, dusty, toughened by habit, and you realize that for many, sandals were a luxury. You keep walking. The leather warms beneath you, growing more pliable with every step. There's something intimate about it, the way it remembers your pace, your stance. The craftsman's words echo. Every foot leaves its story. You're writing yours one footprint at a time. As you near the agora, the sounds grow louder. Vendors are shouting prices for figs and fish, and donkeys bray in protest at the morning rush. You weave through the crowd, your sandals adjusting perfectly, as if they've known you all your life. A man selling pottery calls out to you, pointing at your feet. "New work?" he asks, squinting. You nod, and he whistles appreciatively. "Fine leather," he says. "Collius work." You realize the craftsman has a name now, Collius. You nod again, pretending you already knew. "He shapes the ground," the potter adds reverently. "My wife's sandals lasted 5 summers. She says they walked her through childbirth and festivals alike." You smile. That sounds exactly like Callias. Quiet mastery, unadvertised but deeply trusted. You wander past stalls filled with spices, grain, and textiles. One table catches your eye, a collection of tiny bronze tools glinting under the sunlight. The merchant, an older man with a gray beard, notices your curiosity. "Sandal buckles," he explains proudly, "and clasps, the kind the Spartans favored." You pick one up, a small, sturdy piece shaped like a half moon. The metal is surprisingly heavy for its size. "They preferred bronze over leather knots," the man continues. "Said it gave discipline to the foot." He winks. "Maybe discipline to the soldier, too." In some regions of Greece, Spartans reportedly forbade soft sandals altogether, believing that going barefoot or wearing stiff leather toughened the spirit. Meanwhile, Athenians, ever fond of comfort and aesthetics, saw sandals as an extension of art and civic grace. 2 philosophies, 1 pair of shoes. You set the buckle down, amused at the contrast. Historians still argue, you murmur to yourself, whether fashion or function ruled the Greek foot. The merchant chuckles, overhearing. "They can argue all they like," he says, "but I'll tell you this. No one wins a foot race in bad sandals." You thank him and continue on your way. The ground beneath you shifts from rough cobblestone to packed dirt as you leave the agora and follow a quieter street lined with olive trees. The shade feels cool against your skin, and you slow your pace, savoring the calm. The sandals creak softly, the sound blending with the whisper of leaves overhead. After a while, you notice something strange. Each step leaves a faint, perfect imprint in the dust. You pause, crouching to examine it. The pattern of the sole is distinct, small, intentional grooves carved by Callias himself. You hadn't noticed them before, but now they reveal themselves like hidden art. In ancient Greece, sandal soles sometimes carried designs that left decorative prints as people walked. Hearts, names, even playful phrases. Archaeologists have found examples where the imprint read, "Follow me," or "Catch me if you can," pressed cheekily into the ground. You grin, imagining some long-gone joker trailing flirtatious footprints through the streets of Athens. You lift your foot and glance at the sole again. No words, just neat cross-hatched lines for grip. Practical, balanced, very Callias. Still, for a brief moment, you wish they said something. Maybe, keep walking, or take your time. Something simple, something true. You continue walking, letting the day stretch out like a slow yawn. The city has fully woken now. Children run past with sticks and laughter, and dogs laze in patches of sun. The hum of life is steady and comforting. Somewhere in the distance, a lyre plays, its notes curling gently through the air. You stop near a small fountain to rest. The water trickles quietly, catching sunlight in brief glimmers. You sit on the cool stone edge, dip your fingers into the water, and look down at your sandals again. They've already gathered a fine coat of dust, but somehow they look better for it. Earned, broken in, alive. A man sits beside you, older, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He follows your gaze. "New sandals?" he asks. You nod. "Good work," he says approvingly. "They'll carry you well if you treat them kindly." He pauses, then adds, "You know, when I was young, we'd coat our sandals with beeswax before long walks. Kept the rain out." You raise an eyebrow. "Rain?" He chuckles. "Oh yes, even here. Not often, but when it comes, it floods everything. The smart ones stayed dry, the others learned quickly." You thank him for the advice, and he smiles before rising slowly and continuing on his way. The fountain keeps whispering, the sound soothing enough to make you drowsy. The sandals shift quietly as you stand again, ready to move on. You walk a little farther, toward the edge of the city where the hills begin. The view opens, revealing olive groves rolling toward the horizon, silver leaves flashing in the light. The path underfoot changes again, from smooth dust to pebbled incline. You test your footing carefully. The sandals hold steady. The straps flex but don't slip, and you find your balance easily. "Balance," you whisper to yourself, recalling Callias's mantra. It's almost funny how that one word fits everything, from leather soles to life itself. As you climb, you think of all the people who once walked these same hills. Farmers carrying baskets of olives, shepherds calling their flocks, soldiers heading toward the unknown. Each step a quiet echo layered on the last, building a chorus of footsteps across centuries. Maybe the earth remembers them all. Maybe when you walk, you're adding your own small rhythm to that ancient symphony. By the time you reach the crest, the sun is high and warm. You sit beneath a fig tree, your sandals dusted and glowing in the light. The smell of ripe fruit hangs in the air. You can hear distant voices from the city below, softened by distance. You stretch your legs out in front of you, crossing one ankle over the other, and admire your sandals again. Simple, elegant, unpretentious, yet perfect in their purpose. You think of Callias's hands shaping them, the rhythm of his tools, the quiet pride in his work. It occurs to you that craftsmanship is just another form of memory. The craftsman's touch lingers in every stitch, every curve. Long after he's gone, someone will find a pair like this buried in the dirt and wonder who wore them, what roads they walked. You take a deep breath, letting the warmth settle into your skin, the leather soft against your feet. For a moment, it feels like time itself has stopped to rest beside you. And as you close your eyes, a simple thought drifts through your mind. Something Callias said earlier. The gods gave us bones, but it's up to us to keep them aligned. You smile faintly. Maybe the same goes for stories. When you return to Callias's workshop the next day, the streets are already humming with life. The smell of roasted grain mingles with wood smoke and sea salt, and the sun paints the city in soft bronze. You carry your sandals proudly. Dusted, a little worn from your walk, but comfortable in a way that feels almost personal now. Callias looks up as you enter, his face half lit by the morning light streaming through the doorway. He doesn't ask how they fit. He can already tell by your gait. "Ah," he says, nodding in approval. "They've learned you." He gestures for you to sit while he takes one sandal in hand. His fingers trace the slight creases near the arch. "See," he says, "they've started to remember. The leather bends where you bend, softens where you stand." He looks pleased, almost paternal. A sandal's first day is always awkward. The second day, it starts to listen. You can't help smiling at that. It's funny how easily he talks about sandals as if they were living things. Maybe, in a way, they are. Leather, after all, comes from life, shaped and taught to serve again. He begins rubbing a thin layer of oil into the soles, his movements methodical. The smell of olive oil fills the room, mingling with the faint sweetness of old wood. "You must treat them as you would your own skin," he says. "Feed them light and oil, and they'll carry you far." Historians still argue whether Greek craftsmen like Callias followed written recipes for leather treatment or relied entirely on experience. No texts survive detailing the exact mixtures, only passing mentions: olive oil, animal fat, or wax. It seems likely that each craftsman guarded his own secret method, a recipe learned by touch and passed down quietly through generations. Callias holds up your sandal against the light, examining the sheen. "Good," he says. "Now you're ready for the real test, stones and stairs." You raise an eyebrow. "Stairs?" He chuckles. "Every sandal must climb before it can be trusted. The city isn't all flat streets and markets. You'll know its truth when you walk the hills." So you follow him. He closes the workshop behind you, leaving the cat to doze by the door, and leads you through narrow alleys that twist like vines. The sunlight flickers through cloth awnings overhead. You walk together past the murmuring agora, past rows of painted pottery and amphorae gleaming like trapped sunlight. Finally, the streets begin to tilt upward. The stones underfoot grow irregular, smooth in places, sharp in others. You feel each change through the thin soles, but not uncomfortably. The leather cushions you, flexible but firm. "You see," Callias says, walking easily beside you, "a sandal must know both pleasure and hardship. The same pair that dances in a courtyard should survive the rocky hill." A mainstream fact echoes his words. Ancient Greek footwear wasn't just about comfort. It was also a reflection of social mobility, literally and figuratively. Citizens and slaves alike walked the same terrain, but the quality of their sandals told a silent story about their place in society. A well-made pair like yours was a mark of both pride and practicality. You climb higher. The air grows thinner and carries the faint smell of time. Goats graze on distant slopes, their bells clinking softly. You can see the Acropolis from here, gleaming like a thought-made stone. Callias slows, breathing easily despite the incline. "You feel how the foot shifts?" he asks. "The toes grasp, the heel steadies. That's the conversation between ground and soul." He grins. "Soul, soul, same word in our tongue once. Funny, isn't it?" You laugh softly, the sound carried away by the wind. It's the kind of joke that sneaks up on you later, just as you're falling asleep. You stop at a flat ledge halfway up the hill. Below, Athens spreads like a mosaic, white stone, red tiles, and distant blue sea. Callias sits, gesturing for you to do the same. He pulls a small cloth from his pouch and unwraps a handful of olives and bread. You eat in companionable silence, the leather of your sandals warming in the sun. He looks out at the city thoughtfully. "You know," he says after a while, "there's a story about the first sandal ever made." You lean in, curious. "They say it began with necessity, of course. A hunter stepped on a thorn deep in the hills. His foot bled, and the gods laughed at his foolishness. So he tore a strip of hide from his prey, bound it around his foot, and swore never to be caught barefoot again. Callias smiles faintly. That's how all inventions are born, isn't it? One bad day, one stubborn human, and a bit of hide. You laugh, nearly choking on your bread. Practical mythology, you say. He shrugs. Better than the ones with thunderbolts and curses. Historians still argue whether footwear in early Greek art, painted on vases and carved in marble, represented actual fashion or symbolic imagery. Some scholars believe the depictions of bare feet in temple friezes were not literal, but spiritual, meant to show purity. Others insist they reflect the reality of daily life, where sandals were reserved for travel or the outdoors, and bare feet for sacred or domestic spaces. You point to your own sandals. So these, you ask, would I wear them to a temple? Callias considers this, rubbing his chin. Depends on the god, he says at last. Some prefer humility, others admire craftsmanship, but never squeaky sandals. That's bad luck. You grin. Is that a real superstition? He smirks. It is now. You both laugh, the sound mingling with the distant hum of the city below. After a few minutes, Callias stands again. Come, he says, we've rested enough. Time to descend. The way down is steeper, trickier. The stones are slick in places, polished by centuries of feet. You test your steps carefully, and the sandals grip well, bending just so. It's strange how you can feel more connected to the earth with something between you and it. The leather seems to guide you, not separate you. A quirky tidbit drifts into memory. Certain Greek athletes trained barefoot to toughen their feet, while others wore thin soles to feel the earth's wisdom. Philosophers wrote about this too, about walking as a way of thinking, about the harmony between foot and ground. Even Socrates was known for his bare feet, claiming that the mind stayed sharp when the soles were awake. Maybe he was right. You feel alert, alive, in a quiet way. Each step measured, each sound magnified. The sandals make a soft hush against the stone, a rhythm that soothes more than tires. When you reach the bottom again, Callias stops and looks back at the hill. They passed, he says, simply, meaning the sandals, though you feel he might also mean you. Now they're truly yours. You look down at your feet. The dust of the hill clings to the straps, pale against the dark leather. They look well-traveled, though they've only just begun. Back in the workshop, Callias wipes the soles with a damp cloth. A mark of the road, he says, is not dirt, it's memory. He sets them aside to dry, then gestures to his apprentice, who brings over a small clay bowl filled with wax and herbs. He stirs the mixture with a wooden stick. "This is my own secret," he says, winking. "Smells like thyme and olive, but holds the leather together through rain and sun." He spreads the salve across the sandals in slow, deliberate motions, sealing the pores like a promise. You breathe in deeply. The scent is rich, herbal, and warm. The wax catches the light, turning the leather to bronze. Finally, he hands them back to you. "Now they're ready," he says quietly. "You could walk to Delphi in these, or home, or nowhere at all. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you walk." You slip them on again, feeling the familiar fit. They move with you, silent and sure. Callias nods once, satisfied. "Remember," he adds, "a good sandal outlives the man who made it." There's a pause, a soft, thoughtful silence filled only by the sound of the cat stretching somewhere near the back of the room. You look down at your feet, then at him, and say, "Then I'll walk carefully." He smiles, faint but genuine. That's all anyone can do. Outside, the afternoon sun glows on the horizon, turning the dust to gold. You take your first steps beyond the workshop, each one steady, quiet, and sure, your sandals whispering softly against the ancient ground. You wake the next morning to the sound of gulls and the faint murmur of merchants setting up their stalls by the harbor. The light filters through thin linen curtains, turning the air the color of honey. Your sandals rest near the door, still faintly scented with wax and thyme. You slip them on, and they welcome your feet like an old friend, softened by yesterday's climb, molded just right. The day feels slower today. Maybe it's because you've decided to take your sandals somewhere new, somewhere beyond the familiar streets of Athens. You sling a small satchel over your shoulder, step out into the cool air, and start walking toward the port. The cobbled streets are already warming under the sun. You pass fishermen repairing nets, their fingers moving faster than thought, women washing wool in shallow basins, children chasing each other, barefoot, their laughter echoing between the stone walls. You notice again how rare it is to see someone wearing sandals quite like yours, sturdy, well-cut, with symmetrical straps that cross gracefully over the instep. There's something intimate about walking in history, especially in footwear once so ordinary it was invisible. The world remembers kings and temples, not the sandals that carried them. But today, you decide to remember the sandals. As you make your way down to the docks, you think of how these designs, simple, elegant, would one day inspire shoes across empires. Roman caligae, Egyptian woven sandals, even medieval slippers would owe some small debt to the humble Greek craftsmen who balanced beauty with function. Historians still argue whether the Greeks borrowed their sandal patterns from older civilizations like Egypt or Crete, or whether they developed their own style independently. The evidence is scattered. Paintings on urns, a few preserved soles in damp caves, faint impressions in ancient dust. You find a bench near the water and sit, letting the breeze lift your hair. The sea stretches endlessly before you, a liquid mirror. Boats creak and rock gently, and the rhythmic sound almost matches your breathing. Your sandals rest lightly against the stone, the leather cool and pliant. A sailor nearby notices your footwear and grins. "Those are fine work," he says. "Callias, yes?" You blink. "You know him?" "Everyone in this port knows him," the sailor says, tying a knot in a thick rope. "Half the fleet wears his sandals. The man could bind wind if he wanted to." You laugh softly, picturing Callias trying to fit straps around the sky. The sailor shrugs, then glances at your sandals again. "You planning to travel?" You shake your head. "Just walking." "Good choice," he says. "Walking keeps the mind steady. The sea, she takes it away." He turns back to his work, and you watch him for a while, listening to the quiet slap of waves. You can almost understand his point. The world feels safer when your feet are touching something solid. You start walking again, this time along the narrow path that runs beside the shore. The air is thick with salt and the scent of seaweed. Tiny shells crunch under your soles, and you think about all the feet that have walked this same coastline. Merchants, soldiers, lovers, messengers, each leaving invisible traces that time eventually smooths away. A quirky fact drifts through your memory. In some Greek coastal towns, sandal soles were carved with messages or symbols. Lovers would stamp hearts or names into the sand as they walked. Some enterprising shopkeepers even used sandals that left the words "Follow me" behind them, a clever form of ancient advertising. You imagine Callias shaking his head at that, muttering something about cheap tricks. You pause near a cluster of rocks and look down. The tide has receded, leaving a line of wet sand dotted with prints, some barefoot, some shod. You lift one foot and press it gently beside them, watching the impression fill with water. there's something oddly satisfying about seeing your sandals pattern merge with the sea. As you continue, the path curves inland, winding between olive groves and low stone walls. Cicadas hum lazily in the heat. The trees cast shifting shadows, and the sunlight flickers across your legs like liquid gold. You can feel the slight give of the earth beneath each step, the way the sandals flex with you. You pass an old shepherd sitting on a rock, his flock grazing nearby. He's mending a broken strap on one of his own sandals, the leather cracked from years of wear. You stop for a moment, watching his slow, practiced motions. He looks up and smiles. "A fine day for walking." "It is," you say. "Do you make your own sandals?" He nods. "Who else would know my feet as well as I do?" He chuckles softly. "You city folk forget, sandals aren't just for walking. They teach patience. You mend them, they mend you." You smile. There's truth in his words. The act of maintenance, the quiet ritual of care, becomes its own kind of meditation. Historians still argue whether cobblers and craftsmen in ancient Greece worked mostly in urban centers or traveled from village to village. Some evidence suggests itinerant sandal makers carried their tools in small wooden boxes, setting up temporary stalls wherever there was demand. Perhaps that's why sandal styles varied so widely, from the delicate attic forms of the city to the thicker, more rugged soles of mountain folk. As you leave the shepherd behind, the road rises gently toward the hills. The wind cools, carrying the scent of cypress. Each step feels smoother now, more natural. The sandals move as if they were part of you. Halfway up the hill, you find a shaded spot beneath a pine tree and sit. You pull one sandal off, turning it in your hands. The sole is already darkened by use, tiny grains of sand caught in the stitching. You brush them away, running your thumb over the smooth leather. There's beauty in the wear, you think, the quiet proof that something has served its purpose. Perfection is overrated. It's the scuffs and creases that tell the story. You remember Callias saying that sandals learn their owners. Maybe it's true. You look at the faint imprint of your toes, the curve of your heel pressed into the leather, and it feels almost like a signature. The cicadas grow louder in the afternoon heat, their song a steady drone that makes your eyelids heavy. You lie back in the grass for a moment, one sandal still in your hand, the other on your foot. The sunlight filters through the branches above, painting the world in sleepy gold. It's funny, you think, how something as small as a pair of sandals can anchor you in time. Empires rise, philosophers argue, poets dream. But every one of them still needs something between their feet and the earth. You close your eyes for a moment, half asleep, half awake. Somewhere in the distance, a goat bleats. The wind stirs the grass. The earth feels alive beneath you, humming softly, as if in conversation with your heartbeat. When you open your eyes again, the light has shifted. Shadows stretch long across the ground, and the air feels cooler. You sit up, brush off your tunic, and slide your other sandal back on. The leather hugs your foot perfectly now, like a memory turned solid. You start walking back toward the city, the rhythm of your steps blending with the distant sounds of the world. The sea, the wind, the soft clop of sandals against stone. A final thought drifts through your mind as you approach the gates of Athens. These sandals, simple as they are part of something larger, a lineage of hands and hides, of patience and craft. They carry not just you, but centuries of small human effort stitched into every step. And maybe that's the quiet magic of them. Not divine, not heroic, just human. The kind of thing the gods would overlook, but that keeps the world moving all the same. By the time you return to Athens, the evening light is spilling across the rooftops like warm honey, soft and unhurried. The city hums with its usual end-of-day rhythm. Vendors packing up their goods, children darting between alleys, the scent of cooked lentils and roasted garlic drifting from open windows. Your sandals, once gleaming, are now filled with dust and salt, but they feel better than ever, molded to your stride, whispering softly with every step. You make your way back toward Callias's workshop, though you have no particular reason to. Maybe it's habit. Maybe you just want to share what you've learned. The subtle pleasure of walking not to arrive anywhere, but to listen. The street grows quieter the closer you get to his door. When you enter, the familiar smell greets you. Leather, oil, faint ash from the forge. Callias is there, bent over a new pair of sandals, threading a strap through its slot with absolute concentration. His apprentice sits cross-legged on the floor, rubbing a piece of hide with a round stone to soften it. The cat is asleep again, one paw over its nose. "You've been walking," Callias says, without looking up. You grin. "How could you tell?" He gestures vaguely toward your feet. "The dust tells stories." "So, what did you learn from the road?" You think for a moment. That sandals don't carry you. They remind you that you're grounded. Callias finally looks up, smiling. "Ah, you've begun to understand." He wipes his hands on a cloth and motions you closer. On the workbench lie a few half-finished pairs, each a little different. Some are narrow and delicate, clearly made for wealthy patrons. Others are thick-soled, meant for soldiers or travelers. Every foot has its own truth, he says. Every life, its own terrain. He picks up one unfinished sandal and traces a finger along the edge. This one is for a stonemason. He works near the Acropolis, needs strength in the arch. This pair, he gestures to another, is for a girl who dances in the festivals. Light, flexible, easy to slip on and off. He turns back to you. "And yours?" "They've seen hills, sand, and one philosophical goat," you say, deadpan. Callias chuckles. "Then they've earned their place." He gestures to a small stool, and you sit, watching him work. His knife moves in short, confident strokes, shaving the edge of the sole until it's smooth. There's a rhythm to it. Snip, pull, breathe. The sound alone could lull you into a trance. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your memory. Shoemaking was one of the more respected trades in ancient Greece, partly because of its association with Hermes, the god of travelers and messengers. Hermes himself was said to wear winged sandals, talaria, crafted by the gods to carry him between worlds. To make sandals, in a way, was to honor the boundary between motion and rest, between mortal and divine. "Did you ever make a pair for someone important?" you ask. Callias pauses, the knife halfway through a strap. "Important?" he repeats, amused. "Every pair is important to the one who wears it. But if you mean rich or famous, yes, once." He leans back, remembering. There was a philosopher, years ago, one who believed in walking more than talking. He came in barefoot, said shoes made people too proud. I told him pride lives in the head, not the heel. He laughed and ordered 2 pairs. Who was he, you ask? Callias smiles. Historians still argue whether it was Socrates or just a man pretending to be him. Either way, he paid well. You both laugh quietly. The workshop feels timeless in moments like this, suspended between the smell of oil and the soft scrape of tools. The apprentice finishes polishing a sandal and holds it up. The light catches the surface and it glows faintly, like a small piece of bronze. "Good," Callias says. "Now, remember what I told you about the sole." The boy nods, repeating the lesson. Thick for the road, thin for the heart. Callias nods approvingly. Exactly. You tilt your head. Thin for the heart? He gestures to your feet. When you want to feel the ground, when you want to know where you are, the thinner the sole, the better. Soldiers and dancers understand that. The ground tells them what's coming. It makes sense. You think back to the way your sandals bent with each step on the hill, how they seemed to predict the uneven stones before your mind did. There's something elegant about that kind of awareness, a partnership between body and world. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Archaeologists once found ancient Greek sandals with tiny bronze studs arranged in patterns, not for traction, but decoration. Some even left glittering imprints on marble floors during ceremonies, the ancient equivalent of sparkly sneakers, perhaps. You share this with Callias, who shakes his head, smiling. Fashion before function. It always returns, no matter the age. He sets his tools aside and gestures toward a shelf lined with wooden forms, models shaped like human feet. Some are smooth, some cracked with age. Each carries a faint mark, a carved initial, or a groove where countless straps once wrapped. These, he says softly, are my ghosts. You trace your fingers along one of them. The wood is cool and worn. You keep every mold? Of course. They remind me that every pair of sandals begins as a story about someone's journey. Once the person is gone, only their outline remains. The words linger, heavy and tender. You look around the dim workshop, realizing how each tool, each scrap of leather, hums with its own quiet purpose. Callias pours 2 small cups of watered wine and hands you one. "To good steps," he says. You clink cups and take a sip. The wine tastes faintly of figs and dust. He leans back, eyes half closed. "Do you know why sandals became a symbol of wisdom?" You shake your head. "Because the wise never run," he says. "They walk, slowly. They know where they've been." You can't help smiling at that. Outside, twilight has deepened into the soft indigo of early night. Through the open door, you can hear the city settling. Voices dimming, torches flickering to life. The steady hush of the wind moving through the narrow streets. Callias finishes his drink and sets the cup down. "Tomorrow," he says, "you should visit the tanner's quarter. You've seen the sandals born, now see where they begin." You hesitate. "I thought tanning was, unpleasant." He grins. "It is, but even unpleasant things have beauty when you look close enough. Besides, if you want to understand your sandals, you must meet their ancestors." You nod slowly. "All right, the tanner's quarter it is." Good. He stretches, cracking his back with a satisfied groan. "Go home, get some rest. Tomorrow will smell worse than anything you've met so far." You laugh, already imagining the stench of animal hides and lime pits. "Something to look forward to," you say dryly. As you stand, the cat finally stirs, stretches, and pads over to brush against your ankle. It sniffs your sandal once, as if approving, then wanders off again. Callias waves lazily as you step out into the night. "And remember," he calls after you, "don't polish them too much. A sandal with no dust has no soul." You walk home slowly, savoring the weight of his words. The stones are cool now underfoot, and the air carries a hint of smoke and sea. Every step feels measured, like punctuation in a story that's still unfolding. By the time you reach your doorway, the moon has risen, pale and unbothered, watching over the sleeping city. You set your sandals by the bed, their straps curling slightly as if exhaling after a long day. You lie down, eyes heavy, listening to the faint sounds outside. A dog barking somewhere distant, the soft creak of a shutter, your own breath settling into rhythm. And for a moment, you imagine all the other sleepers in this city, each with their sandals beside them, each with their stories pressed into the soles. A quiet fellowship of walkers, dreamers, and wanderers, carried by leather and time. Morning comes softly, like a whispered secret across the rooftops. The air smells faintly of salt and olive oil, and the streets of Athens are still quiet, the city yawning and stretching into the day. You slip on your sandals without thought now. They're molded to your feet, each strap a familiar embrace. Every step carries a small memory of yesterday's climbs and cobblestone adventures. You decide to visit the Tanner's Quarter, as Callias suggested. The district lies beyond the busy agora, tucked between narrow alleys and low, sun-baked buildings. The streets are uneven, littered with scraps of hide and the occasional stray straw, but your sandals hold steady, adjusting naturally to every irregular stone and dust patch. As you approach, the smell hits first, sharp, earthy, and unmistakable. Lime pits and raw hides mix with smoke from small fires where scraps are being boiled and softened. It's pungent, almost assaulting, but somehow comforting in its honesty. This is the origin of your sandals, the raw beginning before elegance and polish. Historians still argue whether tanning in ancient Greece primarily relied on vegetable-based processes, using bark and leaves, or on quicklime and water to remove hair and fat. Evidence suggests both methods coexisted, each with its own regional preference and subtle trade secrets. Either way, the smell is part of the story, a marker of labor, patience, and transformation. You watch as a tanner works a large slab of hide over a wooden frame, scraping it with a curved knife. The hide is thick, raw, and unyielding. The tanner dips it repeatedly in water, stretching it under his strong arms. You notice the way the hide begins to change, softening gradually, the surface smoothing, fibers aligning. It's almost mesmerizing, a dance between human effort and material willing itself into shape. Nearby, another worker spreads out a thin, almost translucent piece of leather, running oils and plant extracts into it. The scent is gentler here, earthy and herbal. A quirky fact comes to mind. Some Greek tanners would add extracts from pomegranate or myrtle to impart color and subtle fragrance. People sometimes claimed that shoes made from these hides carried luck or vitality. You wonder if Callias ever tried such experiments. You step closer to a vat where hides soak in a mixture of water and lime. The surface bubbles faintly, releasing faint vapors. The workers move with methodical precision, flipping hides, checking thickness, stretching edges. One tanner catches your gaze and smiles faintly. "First time here?" he asks. You nod. "Callias suggested I visit." He grins knowingly. "Ah, you're learning the truth of leather." You follow his movements carefully, curious how every stage shapes the final product. He scrapes, washes, and presses the hides with attention to minute detail. Your own sandals suddenly feel miraculous, polished, finished, and wearable. You realize each pair carries the invisible labor of hours, maybe days, before ever reaching a foot. A mainstream historical fact floats into your thoughts. Greek tanneries were often located on the outskirts of towns due to their strong odors, yet they were essential for the economy. Leather was used for sandals, belts, armor, straps for chariots, and countless other practical items. To touch a finished sandal is to hold centuries of skill in your hand. You notice a small child near a pile of scraps, playing quietly, arranging pieces into little towers. The tanners glance at him, amused, but allow it. One even hands him a tiny, soft scrap to play with. "He'll learn patience early," the older tanner says. "Leather teaches better than lessons sometimes." You watch as another worker dyes a hide with dark pigments, rubbing carefully to create a deep, even color. His hands are stained, almost artistic in their motion. "Color comes after care," he mutters, almost to himself. "You can't rush leather." The child, oblivious to the adult concerns, presses his fingers into a soft scrap and laughs. You think of Callias's words about the sandals learning their owner. Perhaps leather learns from humans too, absorbing patience, touch, and attention. Historians still debate how far Greek tanners' techniques influenced neighboring regions. Evidence of imported hides and tanning methods suggests trade and knowledge traveled alongside UDs. Some scholars believe these methods laid the groundwork for Roman shoemaking, while others insist the Greeks retained their own distinct style. Either way, standing here, you feel the continuity, a hidden thread of craftsmanship linking centuries. You notice that some hides have subtle scars or markings, imperfections that survived the tanning process. Callias had told you before that no hide is perfect, and indeed, these blemishes add character. You imagine the final sandals, polished and shaped, hiding these imperfections, yet carrying them quietly as proof of life, of experience. The tanners move in practiced silence. Each step is deliberate, each motion measured. There's no rush, only the rhythm of human labor harmonized with material response. You realize the beauty lies not in the final product alone, but in the process. The stretching, the soaking, the massaging of fibers until the leather yields. Some tanners believe that talking to the hides improve their quality. Whispering encouragement, joking, even singing softly while working. You chuckle, imagining Callias instructing the leather to walk wisely before shaping it. Perhaps there is some truth in it. Leather, after all, responds to touch and warmth, and maybe the human voice was just another subtle pressure. You step back and survey the scene. Vats of soaking hides, tables with oil-rubbed sheets, tanners bending and scraping, children playing. The smell of lime, herbs, and earth all mingling together. It's chaotic and orderly at the same time, a living tapestry of labor. You pick up a small scrap of leather, pressing it between your fingers. It's still stiff, cool, and faintly rough. You imagine Callias transforming this very material into a supple sandal, ready to hug a foot perfectly. There's magic in that simplicity, the ability to take something raw, untamed, and shape it into something both beautiful and functional. A mainstream fact rises naturally. Tanning wasn't just about sandals. Ancient Greeks used leather for armor, drum skins, straps, and more. Each object required understanding of different properties: thickness, flexibility, durability. Sandals demanded one balance, armor another. Yet the skill overlapped, the craft echoing across uses. You kneel and study the soaked hide once more. Tiny fibers weave in subtle patterns, almost invisible until pressed to light. You wonder how Callias learned to notice these details, how he judged which hide would become soldier boots, festival shoes, or simple everyday sandals. The tanner notices your interest. "See," he says, "every hide tells its story. Yours, mine, and all the feet that will touch it. You must listen before you decide." You nod, understanding what he means. Sandals are more than footwear. They are stories pressed into shape, waiting to be read by those who walk in them. Finally, you rise and thank the tanners for letting you observe. You step away from the pungent, vibrant quarter, inhaling deep breaths of mixed scents: lime, oil, herbs, and dust. Your own sandals feel lighter now, carrying both memory and understanding, bridging the raw beginning and refined end. Walking back toward the city, you notice small details you'd missed before: the subtle curve of a stone, the rhythm of your steps in response to the street, the quiet pulse of life around you. Each motion reminds you that every object, every piece of leather carries the trace of labor, patience, and human touch. By the time you return to familiar streets, the sun has moved high, painting shadows long and gold. You glance down at your sandals, now more than mere footwear. They are lessons, companions, and quiet reminders of everything from the tanner's vats to the hills beyond the city. The city hums gently around you, indifferent but alive. And as you continue walking, the leather whispers softly with every step, like a secret only you are allowed to hear. The following day, you decide to explore the quieter paths of Athens, streets that curl like soft smoke through neighborhoods forgotten by most tourists. Your sandals have settled completely now, each strap molded to the subtle curves of your foot, the leather alive with memory. Every step feels precise, measured, as if the shoes themselves are guiding you through the rhythm of the city. The sun is gentle, casting a soft glow across whitewashed walls and faded frescoes. You notice the aroma of baked bread drifting from doorways, mingling with the faint tang of herbs drying in the sun. A cat stretches lazily across a stone step, tail flicking. You walk past slowly, listening to the soft creak of your leather against cobblestones. You pass a quiet courtyard where olive trees bend gracefully, their leaves whispering in the breeze. The pattern of sunlight and shadow dances across your feet, and the sandals seem to shimmer slightly with every step. You pause for a moment to observe. Even in this small, seemingly ordinary place, the details of life, cracked tiles, worn edges of stone benches, the scent of oil lamps carry a quiet weight of centuries. Historians still argue whether the average Athenian's daily footwear was more functional or decorative. Some suggest that most people owned multiple pairs, one for work, one for ceremonial occasions, while others believe that a single pair, patched and repaired, would serve a lifetime. The surviving evidence is fragmentary, but every artifact hints at the balance between utility and artistry. A merchant sets out a display of small bronze trinkets, sandals among them, miniature replicas meant for children or as charms. You pick up one, feeling its solid weight in your palm. It's a small reminder of how footwear has always been more than practical. It carries symbolism, a playful whisper of culture and identity. The merchant notices your interest and smiles. "Careful with the little ones," he says. "They may walk farther than the real sandals ever do." You continue down the narrow alleyways, noticing that the city seems quieter here, older somehow. The walls are chipped, and faded inscriptions hint at forgotten dedications or graffitied thoughts of long-departed Athenians. Every footstep in your well-worn sandals seems to echo softly against stone walls, leaving fleeting impressions in the dust. In some neighborhoods, citizens would leave impressions of sandals in soft clay outside their homes as a subtle signal of who had passed, or even as a secret message. Archaeologists found fragments suggesting these footprint letters contained playful or cryptic messages, like early versions of urban storytelling or even gossip. As you approach the edge of a small plaza, you see an old man sitting beneath a pergola, threading thin strips of leather through a loom. His hands move deftly, twisting, nodding, and looping with precision. You pause to watch. "Making straps?" you ask softly, not wanting to break his concentration. He looks up, eyes twinkling. "Straps, yes, but also patience," he replies. "Every piece must be right. One mistake, and the foot suffers for it." His voice is calm, steady, carrying a hint of the city's timeless rhythm. You kneel briefly to examine a small pile of completed straps. The edges are smooth, polished from handling. "Do people really notice this level of care?" you ask. "Only those who walk slowly," he answers. "Rushing fools miss everything: texture, balance, the life beneath their soles." You step back and consider your sandals. They've absorbed the lessons of the hill, the workshop, and now the quiet streets. Each crease, each bend, each softened strap is a record of where you've been and how you've walked. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. In classical Athens, sandal making was a respected craft, sometimes passed down in families for generations. Workshops were often small and unassuming, yet they produced items integral to daily life, commerce, and even religious practices. Good sandals were valued not only for comfort, but also as an indication of status and taste. You wander into a smaller street lined with low pottery shops. The aroma of wet clay mixes with the faint smell of herbs and ink from a scribe's open window. A young girl is kneeling beside a shallow basin, rubbing soft leather straps into a glaze. You notice how carefully she moves, slow, deliberate, as though the leather itself demands respect. You pause and ask her what she's doing. She glances up shyly. "Preparing them for polishing," she says. "We have to make sure the leather breathes." You smile, thinking of Callias's words, a living thing that responds to care, touch, and attention. The girl nods, unaware of the connection you've made, and continues her work. You step back, letting the sunlight warm your back. A breeze stirs, carrying a faint scent of the sea from a distant harbor. Your sandals make a soft whisper against the stones, a rhythm that matches the city's pulse. You pause at a small fountain in the center of the plaza, the water gurgling quietly, catching sunlight like liquid glass. You sit on the edge, feet dangling above the stone. The sandals are dusty, soft, and perfect. You dip your fingers into the cool water and let it splash lightly onto the straps. They hiss softly, but absorb the moisture, the leather drinking in the life-giving liquid as if it were meant to. You watch the reflections dance in the water, seeing not just yourself, but a hint of the city around you, the arches, the low walls, the quiet steps of passers-by. You realize that your walk through Athens has been quiet, almost unnoticed, but entirely remembered by your sandals. Historians still argue whether sandals were worn during sacred rituals or removed at every entrance of temples. Some evidence suggests that for certain ceremonies, worshippers wore specially decorated sandals with intricate patterns, while everyday footwear was strictly utilitarian. You imagine your own shoes, flexible and sturdy, walking in both worlds, mundane and sacred. A quirky thought occurs. Perhaps every step leaves an imprint in time, not just on dust or clay, but in memory. The tanners, Callias, the girl in the sunlit alley, all have left traces in your path, much like your sandals leave traces on the streets. You rise, dusting your tunic and settling your satchel. The sun has begun to tilt westward, painting long shadows across the stones. You start walking back toward familiar streets, each step measured, quiet, and deliberate. Even as the city hums around you, the faint clatter of shutters, the distant call of merchants, the soft murmur of conversation, your focus remains on the leather beneath your feet. Each step feels like both a continuation and a pause, a quiet meditation. By the time you reach your own doorway, the sun is dipping lower, painting the sky with gold and violet. You set your sandals down beside the bed, brushing off the fine dust of the day. You sit for a moment, noticing the faint grooves in the leather, the way they've absorbed the rhythm of your walk. And for a quiet, lingering moment, you understand that sandals are not just objects. They are companions, reminders, vessels of memory. They carry you through streets, hills, workshops, and quiet courtyards, gathering stories in their subtle curves and softened edges. You lie back, eyes heavy, ears still hearing the distant life of Athens, and feel the day settle into your bones. Your sandals rest quietly beside you, patient and familiar, like gentle friends waiting for tomorrow's steps. The next morning, you wake to the muted hum of Athens stirring, distant voices, the clatter of pots, and the occasional clip-clop of horses passing on cobbled streets. Sunlight spills into your room in soft golden stripes, and you slip your sandals on without hesitation. They greet your feet with a familiar, comfortable embrace, the leather warm and pliant. Each strap feels like it has memorized the exact contours of your feet overnight. You decide to wander toward the outskirts of the city, curious to see the countryside where the artisans source their hides and the animals roam. The streets are quiet, still dusted with the remnants of yesterday's market, and your sandals whisper against the worn stones. You notice how seamlessly they adapt to every uneven patch, the slight rise of a cobble, the shallow depressions along the path. The leather flexes and grips, becoming almost an extension of your foot rather than a covering. As you leave the city proper, the air changes. It grows cooler and carries a faint, earthy scent. Damp soil, dry grass, and wildflowers. Olive trees stretch along the hillsides, their leaves shimmering in the morning light. You pass small farms, their boundaries marked with low stone walls and worn wooden gates. Occasionally, goats bleat softly, and chickens scatter at your approach. Historians still argue how much of the leather used in Athens actually came from the surrounding countryside versus imported from other regions. Some evidence points to local herds being carefully raised, with hides specifically preserved for tanning. Other sources suggest that Athens, a bustling trade center, imported both materials and tanning techniques from islands and mainland regions alike. Either way, you can't help noticing how the landscape itself seems to teach patience and observation. You follow a narrow dirt path that curves gently between olive groves. The dust is fine, clinging to the edges of your sandals, but it also makes each step satisfying, a soft crunch beneath your heels. Your attention drifts to the subtle sound of leather shifting against leather, the gentle whisper of the straps hugging your arches. You realize you've begun listening to your sandals almost as if they were speaking, guiding your pace, warning of rocks or dips ahead. In some rural villages, shepherds would carve tiny symbols into hides before tanning, meant to bring luck or ward off misfortune on long journeys. These marks were subtle, barely noticeable, yet some believed they could influence the wearer's steps, helping them avoid injury or misdirection. You imagine Callias smiling at such superstitions, probably rolling his eyes, but secretly indulging in the idea himself. As the sun rises higher, the path grows more challenging. Loose stones, small ruts carved by rainwater, occasional protruding roots. Each step now requires attention, and your sandals respond perfectly, bending where needed, gripping the ground where stability is required. You feel a rhythm settle into your legs and feet, a quiet cadence that makes the journey feel meditative rather than strenuous. Along the way, you notice signs of previous travelers, faint tracks in the dirt, impressions of sandals similar to yours, sometimes barefoot prints as well. Each tells a story, a transient echo of a person who passed before you, feeling similar sun, similar air, perhaps the same wind on their face. Your sandals, molded perfectly to your steps, leave their own temporary mark alongside these ancient traces. You stop for a moment at a small spring tucked between two rocks. The water is clear and cool, spilling gently over the stones. You kneel and dip a hand in, then touch the surface of your sandals lightly, feeling how the leather drinks in the moisture. The straps absorb it gradually, softening further, as if alive, as if responding to the elements with gratitude rather than complaint. Nearby, a shepherd is tending to a small herd, his sandals dusty and worn, his hands skillful in guiding the animals. He glances at you, smiles, and nods in approval. "Good footwear carries the wise," he says. "The road tests you, but the leather answers." You nod, realizing how true this feels. Sandals are not merely objects. They are companions and instruments of understanding. The subtle interplay between ground, foot, and leather allows you to perceive the world more deeply. Notice textures, slopes, and smells that might otherwise escape attention. A mainstream fact comes to mind. Greek sandals were often designed for specific terrains. Travelers in rugged areas favored thicker soles and sturdy straps, while urban dwellers preferred lighter constructions for smooth streets. This attention to functionality and environment illustrates the practical genius of ancient artisans, crafting items not just for fashion, but for survival and efficiency. You continue along the path, your sandals whispering with every step, until you reach a small hilltop offering a view of the city below. The Acropolis gleams in the morning sun, distant but commanding, and the sprawling streets of Athens fan outward like a living mosaic. You pause and let the view settle in, feeling the leather beneath your feet absorb the warmth of the sun, reinforcing its shape and familiarity. You notice small details now that you would have overlooked before. The subtle creases in the leaves of olive trees, the way the wind bends them slightly, the glint of sunlight on a passing tile, the faint hum of insects among the grass. Everything feels interconnected. The ground, the foot, the sandal, the air, the distant city. Each step you take adds to this quiet awareness. Historians still debate whether sandals in rural areas were influenced more by practicality or tradition. Some suggest that functionality always took precedence in harsh terrains, while others argue that ceremonial or symbolic patterns were preserved even in everyday footwear. You consider your own sandals and realize that they embody both aspects. Practical enough to handle uneven terrain, yet elegant enough to reflect the thoughtful craftsmanship of Callias. As the day progresses, the sun climbs higher and shadows shift beneath your feet. You begin the descent back toward the city, the path now smoother, allowing you to feel the interplay between momentum and resistance, heel and arch, leather and stone. Each step is deliberate, quiet, and soothing, a meditation in motion. You pass a small grove of cypress trees, their scent faint but penetrating. A light breeze moves through, stirring the straps of your sandals and causing a soft whispering sound. The effect is almost musical, and you feel a profound calm settling over you. You realize the sandals have become part of your body, responding to every nuance, every tiny change in terrain, and every shift in your balance. By the time you reach the edge of the city, your feet and sandals feel inseparable, a unified instrument of motion, history, and memory. Each crease, every softened strap, every tiny mark tells a story of hills, rivers, workshops, and quiet observation. You carry both the physical and emotional imprint of the journey, and it feels as if the world has grown larger yet more intimately familiar at the same time. You pause at a familiar fountain, letting the water trickle over your fingers, then return your gaze to your sandals resting on the stone. They are no longer just tools. They are companions, teachers, and silent chroniclers of the paths you've walked. And as you stand, ready to move into the heart of the city once more, you realize the subtle joy of walking is as much about noticing as it is about going. As the afternoon light softens, you wander back into the heart of Athens, your sandals echoing softly against familiar cobblestones. The city has shifted since morning. Shadows stretch longer, mingling with the warm, golden glow of sun-soaked walls. Street vendors begin setting up smaller, quieter stalls for evening trade, their voices hushed but carrying faintly on the air. Your sandals, dusted from the countryside excursion, hug your feet perfectly, each step effortless, rhythmic, almost contemplative. You drift toward a narrow lane that runs parallel to the agora, a place less traveled by tourists and more by local foot traffic. The walls here are textured with layers of history, faded frescoes, carved initials, and patches of old plaster peeling gently in the breeze. You notice the subtle variations in the cobbles beneath your feet, some rounded and worn smooth by centuries of traffic, others jagged, hinting at repairs from long ago. Your sandals adjust with ease, the leather stretching and flexing just enough to maintain comfort without sacrificing grip. In some neighborhoods, ancient Athenians would embellish their sandals with small metal studs or intricate stitching, a subtle display of personality or wealth. These adornments weren't ostentatious, they were intimate, almost like a private joke between maker and wearer. You trace your fingers along the faint edges of your own sandals, appreciating how Callias balanced form and function, ensuring comfort while leaving room for quiet elegance. You pause at a small courtyard where a fountain bubbles softly, the water catching the late afternoon light. A boy kneels beside it, pressing the edge of a miniature sandal into wet clay. Historians still argue whether these tiny imprints were playful marks, symbolic talismans, or early experiments in urban storytelling. Regardless, the idea tickles you, the thought that even in mundane corners, footprints can carry intention and meaning, echoing far beyond their immediate impression. A light breeze carries the faint aroma of roasted chickpeas from a nearby stall. You inhale deeply, letting it mingle with the scent of worn leather and dust. Your sandals crunch softly against scattered pebbles as you walk past, each step a quiet affirmation of rhythm and presence. There's a meditative quality to this, nothing hurried, nothing demanding, just the city, your sandals, and your awareness of every micro movement between foot, leather, and stone. You turn a corner and discover a small cobbler's stall tucked between two larger buildings. A man works quietly, shaping thin strips of leather for straps, his hands expert and precise. He looks up, nodding in recognition, as if sensing a fellow enthusiast of the craft. "Fine leather travels far," he says softly, "but the stories it carries stay with the feet that walk it." You watch his movements, noting the meticulous care in each cut, each fold, each knot. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Greek cobblers were often itinerant, moving between villages and cities, carrying tools and unfinished sandals with them. Their work wasn't merely practical, it was a reflection of local culture, personal skill, and centuries of inherited technique. Every stitch told a story of hands, labor, and time. The man notices your gaze lingering on a partially finished pair of sandals. "Do you make your own?" he asks. "I watch, learn, and walk," you reply. He chuckles softly. "A fine education. The foot teaches more than the eye can see." You move along, feeling your sandals respond to subtle changes in terrain. An uneven stone, a slight incline, the whisper of gravel beneath your toes. There's a harmony between your steps and the path, a gentle dialogue that makes walking feel almost like playing a quiet instrument. The city becomes a stage, and your sandals, seasoned from hills, workshops, and alleys, are both performers and audience. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. In some ancient texts, it is suggested that philosophers preferred sandals with minimal soles to maintain contact with the earth, believing that sensation underfoot aided contemplation. Whether literal or metaphorical, the image amuses you. A group of wise men walking barefoot, debating truth while the leather clings silently to their feet. You wander into a shaded alleyway, where small olive trees grow between stone walls. The shadows stretch long, and the air cools pleasantly. A flock of pigeons takes flight at your approach, their wings brushing against each other in soft, fluttering rhythms. You pause, listening to the gentle flaps, the distant murmur of voices, and the whisper of your sandals on stone. Everything feels interconnected, the world underfoot and the world above, the past and the present, the material and the living. Historians still argue about the prevalence of leather embellishments in daily Greek life. Some argue that highly decorated sandals were confined to festivals and elite gatherings, while others suggest that even ordinary citizens experimented with stitching, dyes, and patterns as a reflection of personal taste. Looking down at your own straps, worn and perfectly molded, you can almost imagine these subtle flourishes hidden in the folds, telling quiet stories only those who walked them would notice. As the sun tilts lower, the light softens, brushing your surroundings with a warm glow. You walk past familiar markets, noticing vendors closing for the day, children playing quietly in corners, and an old woman setting a small tray of herbs on her windowsill. The city has become more intimate in these quiet hours, its rhythm slower, more human, more attentive to the subtle music of movement. You pause again at a fountain, dipping your fingers into the cool water and letting a few drops fall on your sandals. The leather absorbs it, darkening slightly, softening further, responding to touch as if acknowledging the day's journey. Each step forward feels deliberate, a meditation in motion, a conversation with time and material. By the time you reach a quiet square, the city bathed in golden late afternoon light, you notice your sandals have gathered a history of hours. The countryside, workshops, streets, alleys, and alleys' quiet corners. They carry these layers, subtle and invisible to others, yet alive under your feet. You feel the weight of centuries, of hands and feet, of labor and care, carried forward in every soft step. And as the day fades toward evening, you realize the truth that has been growing gradually with each walk. Sandals are more than protection or ornament. They are companions, chroniclers, instruments of understanding. Every step is a choice, a lesson, and a quiet acknowledgement of the world beneath and around you. You pause one last time, inhaling the mix of dust, olive, and fading warmth of the day. The city hums quietly in response, the world settling into a gentle rhythm. You notice your sandals, worn, softened, and perfectly molded, whispering faintly with each subtle movement, reminders of journeys past, present, and those yet to come.
Evening arrives softly, wrapping the city in a calm hush. The sky is painted with pale pinks and deepening purples, and the first stars begin to shimmer faintly above the rooftops. You step out once more, sandals firmly in place, feeling the familiar contours beneath your feet as you move quietly through the streets. Every stone, every groove, every slight incline is a new note in the rhythm of the city's heartbeat, and your sandals respond in kind.
You wander toward a quieter section of Athens, one often overlooked by merchants and citizens alike. Narrow alleys curve unpredictably between old buildings, their plaster cracked and sun-bleached. The scent of evening fires drifts through doorways, mingling with the subtle aroma of olive trees and distant sea air. You take each step slowly, deliberately, noticing how the leather straps flex and bend, adjusting to the gentle unevenness of the worn cobbles beneath. A soft breeze carries faint whispers of conversation from open windows, laughter from children playing near fountains, and the low murmur of someone sweeping a courtyard. Your sandals respond subtly, molding to each patch of stone, shifting slightly as you change your weight. It feels almost as if the shoes themselves are aware, ready to absorb every nuance of your movement, guiding you along the rhythm of the city. Historians still argue about how ancient Greeks perceived the connection between footwear and the body. Some suggest sandals were purely functional, meant to protect the feet while allowing mobility and comfort. Others argue that sandals were an extension of identity, reflecting social status, occupation, and even personal philosophy. Walking now, you can't help but think it is both, the leather protecting and revealing, softening and shaping your experience of the world beneath. You pass a small garden tucked between buildings, its stone pathway lined with low herbs and wildflowers. Bees hum softly around the flowers, and you pause to watch, listening to the faint buzz, the whisper of leaves, and the subtle creak of your sandals. There is a meditative quality in the combination of sensory detail, the touch of leather, the smell of herbs, the hum of insects, the gentle play of light and shadow. A quirky historical tidbit comes to mind. Some Greek artisans believed that walking barefoot or in thin-soled sandals through certain herbs could imbue the leather with subtle fragrances and even minor protective properties. You imagine Callias laughing quietly at such superstition, yet maybe experimenting just enough to indulge the poetic idea. You continue, wandering down an alley where the walls are covered in faint inscriptions and old graffiti. You notice delicate scratches, perhaps made by students, travelers, or residents centuries ago. Each mark seems to whisper its own quiet story, and your sandals leave subtle impressions in the dust along the edges of the stones, a new layer added to the tapestry of movement through this place. A tanner's apprentice passes by, carrying a small bundle of prepared leather. The straps are soft, almost glowing in the fading sunlight, and you notice how he moves carefully, aware of every step and the precious cargo beneath his hands. You recall Callias's words, "Every pair of sandals carries a story, every piece of leather a memory of hands and attention, and every step is a dialogue between material, human, and environment." Greek sandals often employed different techniques for different uses, thicker soles for rough terrain, thinner soles for ceremonial or domestic use, and varied lacing patterns for support, comfort, and aesthetic. These practical distinctions reflect a deep understanding of human anatomy and environmental demands, a synthesis of art and utility that feels almost modern in its sophistication. You step lightly onto a set of worn stairs leading toward a small terrace overlooking the city. The view is breathtaking, rooftops bathed in golden light, smoke rising faintly from chimneys, and the distant glint of marble from public buildings. You pause, feeling the leather straps of your sandals soften slightly in response to your shift in weight. There is an almost imperceptible sound, a gentle whisper of leather against stone that accompanies each careful step. A scholarly observation comes to mind. Historians still debate whether lacing patterns in ancient Greek sandals were purely functional or held symbolic meaning. Some patterns may have indicated social rank or profession, while others were simply the artisan's personal signature. As you glance down at your own straps, worn and molded perfectly to your feet, you appreciate the subtle artistry that guides each motion. You move toward a small fountain tucked at the edge of the terrace. Water trickles softly, catching the last light of day. You dip a finger into the cool water and lightly brush it across the surface of your sandals. The leather absorbs the moisture, darkening slightly, softening further, as if remembering each hill, alley, and workshop you have traversed. You pause, listening to the gentle trickle and the faint murmur of the city below, feeling a profound connection to both past and present. In some villages, travelers would leave small impressions of their sandals in soft clay near fountains or doorways as markers, playful or meaningful. Perhaps some even believed the impressions carried luck or guidance for the next walker. You smile, imagining your own faint traces along these worn stones, quietly participating in a centuries-old ritual of passage. The sun dips lower, the sky deepening to violet and indigo. Lanterns flicker to life in doorways, casting soft glows on textured walls. You continue your slow descent, sandals whispering against stone, tracing the gentle rhythm of the city. Each step feels deliberate, thoughtful, a meditation that is both grounded and transcendent. You pause at a quiet corner, inhaling deeply. The combined scents of leather, herbs, and evening air mingle harmoniously. The gentle sound of footsteps, water, and wind creates a serene symphony. Your sandals, molded perfectly, carry you with a soft whispering echo, absorbing and amplifying the quiet intimacy of the moment. Walking now feels like both movement and stillness, each step a reflection of history, craft, and patience. The city around you is alive yet hushed, carrying centuries of stories that echo faintly underfoot. Your sandals, worn, softened, and perfectly fitted, carry these layers. The hills, the workshops, the alleys, the fountains, the light and shadow, all quietly imprinted in their supple leather. You pause one last time, gazing at the distant Acropolis silhouetted against the deepening sky. Every step you have taken has carried you closer to understanding that sandals are not merely protection or decoration, but companions, guides, and storytellers. They translate the texture of the world into sensation, memory, and quiet reflection. With each movement, you feel the culmination of journeys past and present converging underfoot. And as the lanterns flicker more brightly, the city quiets into evening, and your sandals rest softly on the stone beneath you. You realize that the simple act of walking has become an intimate meditation, a dialogue with history, craft, and the gentle pulse of life itself. Night falls gently over Athens, draping the city in deep indigo and soft silver light. The streets are hushed now, the distant chatter and clatter of the day reduced to faint echoes, carried along narrow alleys and open courtyards. Your sandals, worn, supple, and familiar, hug your feet as you wander quietly, the leather whispering softly against the stone beneath you. Every step is measured, deliberate, yet effortless, the culmination of countless journeys and discoveries. The city feels intimate in this twilight hour. Lanterns flicker in windows, casting warm, golden pools of light onto uneven cobblestones. Shadows stretch long and dance subtly with each movement of the evening breeze. You notice small details you may have overlooked before: the gentle curve of a wall, the texture of worn stone, the faint scent of herbs drying in open courtyards. The sandals beneath your feet seem to carry these impressions, absorbing the world around you in quiet memory. As you wander toward a small plaza, the soft gurgle of a fountain greets you. Water bubbles quietly over the stone edges, catching the glow of lanterns and reflecting tiny fragments of the night sky. You pause, resting your hand lightly on the cool, polished stone, letting your eyes follow the gentle ripples. Your sandals shift slightly beneath your feet, responding to your subtle movements, the leather bending and stretching as if sighing in contentment. Some ancient Athenians believed that walking at night, especially in familiar shoes, allowed the spirit of the city to speak more clearly. The subtle patterns of shadow and light, the soft sounds carried by the air, and the gentle response of leather underfoot could, in theory, reveal stories hidden in plain sight. Whether literal or metaphorical, the idea resonates now as you walk slowly, deliberately, and attentively. Historians still argue whether nighttime footwear held symbolic significance or was purely practical. Evidence suggests that special sandals were sometimes worn for evening rituals or religious observances, adorned with subtle markings or decorations. These patterns could signify devotion, social status, or merely personal taste. Standing here, you feel the quiet poetry of such ideas, the sense that even in something as simple as a sandal, culture, belief, and individuality converge. You continue down a narrow lane, flanked by low houses, their windows glowing warmly. The faint sound of a lute drifts from an open window, mingling with the whisper of leaves and the distant murmur of water. You slow your steps, listening, feeling the rhythm of your sandals responding to the micro slopes and dips of the stones beneath. Each step is a conversation between foot, leather, and the surface beneath, a tactile meditation on presence and awareness. Pausing near a small garden, you kneel and press your fingers gently into a patch of soft earth, then brush your sandals lightly against the soil. The leather absorbs the touch, darkening slightly and softening further. It feels alive, responsive, almost sentient in the quiet intimacy of the moment. You remember Callias's words, "Every pair of sandals carries a memory of its wearer, and every journey leaves traces in both material and mind." Mainstream fact, Greek sandals were crafted with remarkable attention to detail. Different regions, artisans, and uses demanded variations in thickness, lacing, and materials. Footwear had to balance durability, comfort, and aesthetics, a sophisticated synthesis of practical engineering and artistic sensibility. Walking now, you sense the culmination of these considerations in every gentle flex of leather beneath your toes. You stand and continue, moving past a quiet courtyard where olive trees sway in the night breeze. The air is cool, scented faintly with herbs and earth. Small lanterns glimmer in the shadows, casting delicate patterns on walls and ground. Your sandals whisper softly with each step, following the gentle undulations of the terrain, guiding your rhythm and grounding your attention. In some villages, children would hide tiny clay sandals near fountains or doorways, pretending they were messages for travelers or tokens of luck. You imagine yourself slipping along these alleys, leaving subtle imprints in the dust, adding your own quiet mark to the long tapestry of movement and story. The idea makes you smile, and your sandals feel like willing accomplices, carrying both memory and mischief. As you wander further, the city grows even quieter. You notice the faint aroma of olive oil and bread lingering in the air, whispers of distant laughter, the soft gurgle of water from hidden fountains. Your sandals, shaped by countless hours and miles, respond perfectly to every nuance. The slight rise of a step, the gentle slope of a cobblestone, the tiny scatter of gravel. They carry the accumulated wisdom of prior journeys, guiding you effortlessly while recording subtle impressions in the leather's memory. Historians still debate the symbolic importance of worn leather in Greek culture. Some argue that well-used sandals represented experience, wisdom, and the endurance of daily life, while others suggest purely practical reasons governed their creation and use. You sense both. Your own sandals embody practicality, artistry, and quiet narratives, responding to the world in real time while carrying traces of past journeys. You pause one last time atop a low hill, gazing at the city sprawled beneath you. The Acropolis glows faintly in silver moonlight, and the streets are quiet, intimate, and alive with shadowed movement. Your sandals feel perfectly aligned with the earth beneath, soft and responsive, and you notice a profound sense of calm settling into every muscle, every breath. And now, the gentle wind carries you home. Lanterns glow faintly through windows as the city whispers a lullaby of shadow and light. You step softly across familiar stones, your sandals molded completely to your feet, carrying every hill, alley, workshop, and plaza within their leather. Each step is a meditation, a chronicle, a conversation with the past and present. The night deepens. You reach your room, setting the sandals carefully by the bed. You sit for a moment, eyes half closed, listening to the faint rhythms of the city and the whisper of leather in memory. There is comfort in this, a quiet assurance that you have walked with attention, curiosity, and gentle patience. The day is complete, yet the journey continues in the soft whispers of memory and imagination. Now, as the world slows around you, let your breath match the gentle rhythm of your sandals, each inhale and exhale a soft cadence of calm. The city, once alive with motion and labor, rests beneath a silver sky, and the faint hum of night carries a reassuring serenity. Your feet, wrapped in the familiar warmth of leather, remember every step, the hills, alleys, fountains, and workshops. Each mark, each crease, each softened strap is a quiet echo of experience, patiently preserved. Feel the weight of the day dissolve, the intensity of movement softening into a gentle pulse. The stories of tanners, artisans, and travelers, once bustling around you, now rest quietly, like echoes tucked into corners of memory. The scent of earth, herbs, and faintly worn leather lingers, soothing and grounding. Imagine the city stretching into quiet shadow, the flicker of lanterns casting gentle patterns across stone, the soft trickle of fountains harmonizing with the slow rhythm of your breath. Every step you took today is remembered, stored in the supple curves of your sandals, ready to guide future movement with effortless grace. Let your thoughts drift, unhurried and light, following the subtle impressions left on paths long walked, on leather molded by care and attention, on quiet alleys that witnessed nothing and everything. Now, close your eyes. Feel the gentle embrace of familiarity, the tactile memory of every stone, every texture, every whisper beneath your feet. The world outside your window rests, and so can you. Allow this soft calm to carry you slowly into sleep, where footsteps dissolve into dreams, and leather, stone, and city continue their quiet, timeless conversation. End of script. Sweet dreams.